You are able to see slide now, right?
Yes, sir, we can see it. So you can stop sharing your screen for now.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Yes, Kavita. Oh, oh. Yeah. Shall we begin or wait for another 5 minutes?
ચાલુ થઈ રહ્યું.
I think, Monish, we can start now.
Yeah, ma'am.
Is Ashu here?
Yes, ma'am. Good morning. I'm here. I'll start.
Yes.
Good morning, one and all. Present here. On behalf of Research Committee, KC College, HSNC University, I take this opportunity to welcome you all on this online platform of Day 2 of the National Webinar Series on Research in Times of COVID, organized by Department of Sociology in association with Research Committee, KC College. I now call upon Dr. Leena Pujari, convener of Research Committee, KC College, and head of the Department of Sociology. Ma'am, over to you.
Thank you, Ashu. Good morning and a warm welcome to all of you on day 2. For those of you who have joined us today, this webinar seeks to engage with questions of research during the pandemic and specific to the pandemic. This would also entail a discussion on methodologies, paradigms, epistemologies, and ethics in research. And all of this, of course, we intend to do it through an intersectional lens. The first of this series, yesterday and today, shall explore these questions within a qualitative research frame. And this is simply because the pandemic is not just a medical event. It is not about the numbers of people who are infected or fatality or mortality. it also has to, it is a social event. It is a social event that has been quite disruptive, and we're all trying to make sense of the massive shifts that have taken place in our lives. And I think it's very important, therefore, to understand how people are navigating their social world through this uncertain time, these unusual times. And I think these deep, rich insights can come primarily from qualitative inquiries. However, body distancing norms and the restrictions on mobility and interaction have most certainly placed restrictions on qualitative research, and especially what we called the field research. Nonetheless, we are trying to find ways in which we can mitigate these kind of challenges. Yesterday's session, the speaker took us through a very fascinating journey of the possibilities in ethnographic research, and of course, at the same time, underscoring the need to observe a certain caution when it comes to adapting to new techniques of data collection. Today's session will engage with questions of research, ethics in research during a pandemic. Now, ethical questions assume greater significance in these unusual times. I mean, questions of power, confidentiality, anonymity, consent, boundaries, access. I think all of this will define and structure our research paradigm in days to come. Public health research is something that we are deeply interested in, and question of ethics is, of course, without doubt, and an integral part of it. So we are very happy to have with us Dr. Amar Jasani today, who is the right person, in fact, to talk about ethics in social research. Ethics in public health research, while he will look at the whole issue within the frame of social sciences. We have also requested that he bring in the question of ethics in clinical research, because that would also be an interesting area of study. And since we have a diverse audience, that is something which will interest all of us. But before we go ahead with this, Monish, do we have principal with us? No, I don't think our principal is with us. So we shall wait for her to join us later on in the course of the webinar. And may I now request Ashu to please introduce our speaker for the day.
Sure, ma'am. Thank you. The topic for the day is ethics in public health research. For the same, amongst us, as Leena ma'am said, today we have one of the most experienced, distinguished academician and researcher, Dr. Amar Jasani. Dr. Jasani finds his research interest in the field of bioethics and public health. Sir has an exhaustive experience in teaching bioethics in public health since the year 1991. He has been one of the founding trustees of Anusandhan Trust, which manages Sehat in Mumbai and Sathi in Pune for 22 years, wherein he retired from the same in the year 2013. He is also one of the founders of the Forum for Medical Ethics Society and chairs the position of editor for the journal Indian Journal of Medical Ethics since the year 2012. Currently, Dr. Jasani is visiting faculty for several esteemed institutions across the world. To name a few: Center for Ethics, Yenapoa University, Bangalore; Kenya Medical Research Institute, Nairobi; Center for Biomedical Ethics and Culture, Sindh Institute of Urology and Transplantation, Karachi. Sir is a member of Institutional Review Board for Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai. He is also a member of International Ethics Review Board for Medical Science Frontiers. To date, Sir has co-authored and co-edited 9 books, one of which is titled Equity and Access: Healthcare Studies in India, which has been recently published by Oxford University Press in the year 2018. Sir, on behalf of the entire HSNC family, we extend you a warm welcome. Sir, I request you to kindly address this online gathering.
Thank you. Hello and good morning to everybody. Can you hear me? I hope. Am I audible?
Yes,
Hello.
sir. Yes, sir. We can hear you. You are audible.
Okay.
Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you very much for this introduction. As you could see, that I'm not from social sciences. I'm not a sociologist. I tried to become sociologist actually after doing my medicine, and I was planning to do my PhD in Bombay University while I was working in Foundation for Research in Community Health. But I was so busy with the research of my own that I could never do research for my PhD, and so I dropped out. So I am only a medical person, and so you can understand that my own understanding of sociology is not going to be as in depth as many of you will be having. So I entered after doing a lot of public health research and particularly health system research using social science methods to the bioethics, which is slightly different in the sense that it uses social sciences, but is basically a sub-discipline of the philosophy. And from 90s, I started doing more work in this field. And this is a journal we publish. It's quite old now. We started it in 1993. So it's 28 years old now. And from 2005, we started also organizing national level national bioethics conferences. So far, we have done 7 of them. Every alternate year, we have 2020 is the year for the 8th conference, but I don't think we'll be able to do it. If some institution helps us, then perhaps we can try to have an online, national bioethics conference. Otherwise, sometime in 2021, we'll have the 8th one. So this is my background. This is the area that I look at, and that's why what I decided to do is to look at ethics in health research in a broader sense, go into some of the fundamental aspects of what is ethics in research, and then take you to the various aspects of the things that make health research ethical, and then also look at issues related to research integrity, publication ethics, and all. So my presentation is going to be quite broad based rather than focus on COVID. COVID is something that has made all of you quite aware of health. Social sciences are not doing enough research in the field of health. When I used to interact with a lot of my social science friends, I'll find them more in looking at different other social issues. And in his own, they may be looking at food, they may be looking at, education, but health was oftentimes that was not touched. The COVID might change it, and that is a blessing in disguise in the sense that many social sciences institute will now enter the field. So I'm very happy that many of you are interested, and these principles and aspects that I'm going to talk about, they will have applicability to the social science research in health too. So this is what I'm going to cover. Go into some basics things about what is research, what is ethics, and then go into the history part of it. Look at is ethics in research going to be different in the outbreak in disasters? Then look at the benchmarks of the research, which says that what should be the ethics framework when you are doing research. Now, what makes your research ethical? I think that is the question that will be asked there. And then go into the scientific integrity, misconduct, and publication ethics. In between, I'll be showing a short 10 minutes film. So hopefully that will keep you engaged in what I'm talking about. Well, many times we all talk about research without making very conscious effort about defining what we mean by research. Research involves systematic investigation. Investigation many people do. Even the detectives do it, journalists do it. How the systematic is going to be different for the academic researcher, I think that's a very, very important question. That is where science comes. When you do qualitative research, there are definite methodology of doing qualitative research that makes it scientific. Same way, if you are doing quantitative research, it has its own scientific base. So the science is very, very important. The systematization of the science in doing investigation is a hallmark of the research. And what you try to establish is facts, principles, and in medicine, particularly biomedicine, we try to go for generalizable knowledge. In public health also, there is a lot of efforts made to have generalizable knowledge. Medicine, unlike your qualitative research, has a lot of baggages from the positivism, where we believe that there should be a lot of quantitative data and it should be generalizable at the population level, and it should be applicable. One should be able to replicate the findings and that kind of stuff. So we are at the, biomedical research is at the interface of natural science and the social sciences. So we have part we bring from the natural sciences, which is normally saying that what you do should be generalizable. While social sciences, particularly when you go into anthropology and qualitative research, it is very, very context-based, where you try to look at facts, principles, the phenomena that you study, which are applicable to the context and may not be generalizable at the larger level. So this is a variety of the research that we are talking. And what I'm going to present is going to be an ethics which could be applied to all of them, but with certain adaptation depending upon the kind of methodology that we are using. So coming to ethics is another area. We know what ethics actually are. The morality is part of everybody's life. We pick up morality as we grow. Morality we pick up from our religion. Morality we pick up from our family values. We pick up from the community that we come from. And in India, the communities are vast. There is religion, there is a caste, there is a subcaste, all kind of stuff that you will find. Ethnicity is there, the language is there. Our understanding of man-women relationship is there. So gender issues are there. All of them define the kind of morality that you carry. And when you are talking about something, you keep making judgment. I can ask you a simple question that since you got up in the morning, how many times you made a statement which expressed some judgment of something was right or wrong, or good or bad? We do. And such judgments are based on the standard of morality that we pick up as a part of our cultural upbringing. So it is a first order belief and practices about good and evil, by which we guide our behavior. So morality is made up of values, the values that we pick up from our culture, our community, and it has duties. Because if you believe in certain kind of values, you have to have, exercise, do some certain duties according to it. Ethics, on the other hand, is more second order. It is a kind of a discipline, a philosophical discipline that makes you to reflect on the moral judgment that you are continuously passing. When you say that something is good, you need to explain it, why it is good. It's like, color black. Color black is a fact. But black in itself could have certain values embedded into it. All of you know that the whole the campaign and the movement that is going on in US and Europe, and hopefully it will affect India also in coming time, is about Black rights movement. The Black people's lives matter. Same way, there are oppressed people in India, their lives also matter. But the black itself, when it is used in a derogatory manner. So black is a fact, is a color, but it could also have a certain kind of moral value attached. So if you reflect on that and you try to understand whether to use back in a derogatory matter is a good or bad, then you are doing an ethical analysis of your own morality and try to understand that why do I say what I'm saying, right? So this is what it is called ethics, where you are systematic, just like science, where you do systematic investigation. Same way here, we do systematic philosophical inquiry into the moral aspects of what we are doing. So in research, you do a lot of things, and you have to have a systematic, inquiry into, are you doing it correctly, or are you just doing in a a reflex manner which has come from cultural well-being. Your culture says that, well, there are some people who are less than us, we believe in hierarchical order. Many times people say that, well, those poor people are just like that. Why are you bothered about it? But the issue is that should we not be bothered about it? And I think that's where the philosophical reflection comes. And that's how ethics becomes very important. Because if you don't do it, then you may do a very, very harmful research on those people, thinking that, well, their lives don't matter, right? So you'll have a lot of examples in the history where you'll find that those things were neglected and became controversial. So science and ethics have a very close relationship. Once upon a time, it was believed.
Excuse me, sir. May I
Yeah.
just come in for a minute? Can you please come closer? Some people are writing they're not able to hear you very clearly. So if you could just move a bit closer. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
So my voice is not audible.
It's audible to us, but there are moments when it becomes a little low. So it's fine
Okay.
now. Please go ahead, sir. Please.
Okay. Once it was believed that if you bring any value in the scientific discourse, then the science gets tainted. Now it is other way around. They say that, well, when you are doing science, you must look at what kind of values that you are going to promote by doing science. So it's science and the values have suddenly started becoming very interactive, and so uh, ethics is no longer now also based on irrationality of certain values of the culture, but it tries to work out the rationality from the culture and the behavior that is there. So methods of ethical analysis are using a lot of now data or the scientific evidence in order to judge whether something is right or wrong. So ethics analysis uses rational, logical, and facts, and it also incorporates the understanding of the context and history. So that way, it both science as well as ethics have grown quite a lot. Uh, is going research ethics going to be different in the humanitarian crisis and emergencies and disasters? The ICMR is very clear. ICMR National Ethical Guidelines, if you read it, it makes very, very clear that Section 12 is on the disaster and the emergencies. And it says very clearly, while there may be need to undertake research quickly during this kind of crisis, it says that it does not mean that the standards of science and standards of ethics are lower. What you have to do is that you have to pay more attention, because people may be very vulnerable. People may be so scared that without applying their mind about risk and benefits involved in participating research, they just agree. So you need to have a more stringent standards used there. So this is what it says. And so please, when I talk about ethical principles and the ethics standards, don't believe that they are for the only normal time and not for the emergencies. You all must be knowing. We just go to a little bit in history. How many of you may have seen this photograph? This comes from Nuremberg. Okay, Nuremberg trials are very, very well known. And there, one of the trials were on medical doctors who did inhuman experimentation in the concentration camp. I can't describe you all the concentration camp experiments. You have to read it. It's horrible. And these doctors were involved in doing it. They were like any ordinary doctor like you and me, but they believed. They got so carried away by the science, and they believed that these people on whom they were doing experiments were subhuman, because they said that, well, these are plague. These people are not they are unhygienic. The whole issue of hygiene and public health as it was used in Nazi Germany was very, very important, because they made them very relaxed about doing any kind of experiment there. So this was the major beginning of ethics consciousness in research, both for biomedical sciences as well as social sciences, because social sciences also had the similar debates going on, and this one made it to bring it in a big way. So what we'll do is that look at some of the controversies, because unless you look at the controversy, you don't understand why certain guidelines were done and why these guidelines are connected to the principles and the theories of the ethics. So in order to understand guidelines, we should see what principle underlies them, how this principle is actually connected to some of the processes, what provoked this principle to come into force and translate into guidelines. And that is where the controversies needs to be studied. So you have Nazi experiments, I already talked to you. The doctors also did a Tuskegee trial, which lasted 40 years from 1932 to 1972. Black people who were having syphilis, they were not provided treatment for 40 years in order to understand what happens when the syphilis is infecting you. And so till they died, they wanted to study without treating them. It's like saying that, well, you get COVID infection, don't make any effort. Just study them so that you know how the pathophysiology of the disease develops. So this was the study that came into light in 1972. 40 years in such a society, nobody cared simply because, and this does not mean that 40 years doctors were not producing at least one article every year in the medical journal. Everybody was reading the article, but nobody asked this question. Well, what are you doing to these black people? More than 500 of them whom you are recruited and you are following. And so when this kind of research is done on a very vulnerable people, oppressed people whose voice is not heard in the society, nobody cares. Although everybody knows about it, that it is going on, but well, it could be done because ultimately the findings will help millions of people, to better their life. In India also, there was the Narangwal project, which was done in Punjab region, where they wanted to study whether nutrition is good to combat infection or the medicine. And so they had a cluster randomized trial. So they had one section, one villages where they provided nutrition. There were villages where they provided only antibiotic to the children who were getting infected, and then third where provided both the nutrition as well as medicine, and the fourth they provided nothing. And they tried to find out, and so obviously the answer was that the children who were given nutrition and antibiotics, they recovered from the infection faster than those who were given only nutrition or only antibiotic. And of course, those who were just given nothing, they did not recover very well. So this was also done in India, and there are many Indian studies of this kind. So these are the biomedical and public health studies. Coming to social sciences, anthropology was debated quite a lot during World Wars and Vietnam War. And many anthropologists are very important for because they have a technique, they have skills to collect data, listen to things, and that is what the spies do. They listen, they eavesdrop, right? And so there were anthropologists who helped allies in First and Second World War. This is a very documented thing, and there was a big debate on this in the anthropological societies. And the more information came out in 1990s when the freedom of information, like our RTI, was passed in the Western countries, and they discovered this information. Vietnam War is also well known, that the anthropologists found out where there were supporters of communists and where there were supporters of the royal troops, and the Americans kept bombing only those villages where the supporters of the communists were there. So it's also a very well documented thing, where social scientists who were researchers who provided information to the armed forces. Another well-known project in political science was Project Camelot in 1965, where armed forces wanted to study, in Latin America, why there were, insurgency in Latin America and how to control it. It became very, very big controversy to the extent that there were diplomatic relationship between the countries were affected. So, the who provides the money for the project is very, very important, right? It's also in the name of nationalism and national security. Can the social scientists do research which could be harmful to the participants of the research? So this is another area well known. Psychology had a massive controversy. Two well-known things are Stanford prison experiment, where they wanted to do the role play, where they showed that once while doing role play, you may get carried away in what you are doing. That means the role assigned to you in this in your work, it determines the kind of behavior you have. So here there were students who were who were doing this role play, where they found that those who were acting as a prison warden started doing the same kind of torture on the prisoners as happens in the reality. Milgram experiment was to understand obedience. This was immediately after Second World War, that is immediately after Nazi thing, that why people became so obedient to one dictator called Adolf Hitler. This obedience came from some kind of tendency or psychological tendency within the human being. And Stanley Milgram wanted to study it. And he found out that when people were under certain circumstances asked to harm others, they did. And this was a big controversy. Both of them were very controversial experiment because students were used there. They were paid money to be part of it. And when they came to know that they had actually, they could have actually harmed the people, then there was a psychological, reaction to them. And ultimately, they came to know that they had not harmed anybody because everything was a deception. And deception is used quite a lot in psychological study. And let me tell you the last one is tea room trade study of Lord Humphrey. This was on homosexuals in US. It was a PhD thesis in Harvard. And the deception was the main thing, where he wanted to study the behavior of homosexuals. So he goes to the restroom of public restroom where the homosexuals meet, and he started helping them. And he actually noted down the car registration number of each one, and then went to their houses to find out whether they were married, they were having children, and he did this study. He did not tell them that he was doing research, and he actually impersonated as a supporter of homosexuals, and later on as a marketing researcher to get the information on them. So it became a very big issue. Lord Humphrey's PhD was almost withdrawn. Ultimately, he survived, and so that was in a way not a very negative consequence, but it did teach everybody that you cannot use deception in research in the manner as he had done it. Anyway, all these experiences led to some kind of code of ethics for the research, and they are now applicable to all health research that we do. It started with 1949, the Nuremberg Trial judgment, which is called Nuremberg Code, which talked about informed consent. Then World Medical Association in 1964 designed the Helsinki guidelines. They are very important. You will find that it is upgraded every few years. The last one was done in 2013. It is considered to be standard for biomedical and public health research, and you must read it. It's not a very long guideline, 30 to 40 paragraphs. Excellent, gist of what needs to be done there. WHO CIOMS is also having a guideline, and the last one they came out with was in 2017. It is similar to Helsinki Declaration, but it is more in detail, and there are certain variation between the Helsinki and WHO. But both of them are considered to be very standard. We normally refer to them when we are doing research. There's a WHO guidelines also on the managing ethical issues in the infectious disease outbreak. There is a section on research there. An Indian Council of Medical Research has been is something that is applicable to us. The last guidelines that came out was in 2017. They have a section 12, which is on infectious disease outbreak and disaster. So I hope these are all available open access. So I hope you will be able to download and read them. Anyway, we go to principles now very quickly. This is a methodology for moral reasoning, where you have to explain why what you are doing in research is right. And you know about the theories. Being a sociologist, I'm sure all of you deal quite a lot with theories. Doctors don't do so much of philosophical theories. Utilitarianism, all of you know, consequentialism, where we think that an action should be justified on the basis of what would be the consequence of that action. And J.S. Mill, Jeremy Bentham, David Hume, you must have heard of all these names, who have propounded this theory. And the rule utilitarianism is the one which helps you quite a lot in designing rules and the laws, because much of the law is often based on consequentialist theory. On the other hand, you have Immanuel Kant, which talks in terms of a principle which should be applicable across the board. It's not just about consequences. The consequences may be good or bad, but what you did, was it right or not? So it is called categorical imperative. That's truth telling should be good in any circumstance, right? Even if there is a short term bad consequence, you have to look at the long term, good consequence of it. And so you have, many principles, and particularly human rights principles, which are very, very important in order to connect to the ethics, where the deontological theories becomes very, very important. You must understand also that deontology was very much part of the religious principles, while what Immanuel Kant did was a brought rationality to it, and said that, well, you cannot just take a principle for granted because it is written in some book. You have to rationally explain that why this principle in the current situation should be taken as a universal principle, and based on that, you accept it as a categorical imperative, and not simply because it is received from certain kind of sources. And the last one is virtue theory. You might have heard about it. Aristotle and Plato. William Osler was one of the major proponent of it in medicine. It emphasizes the personal character. Good people don't do normally bad things. That is we keep saying that, and it is related to that. But at the same time, virtue theory alone is not sufficient. The history is replete with examples of good people doing bad things. And that's where, most of you are researchers, and you consciously, intentionally, you would not like to do anything bad to your participants, right? But yet, we end up doing it because we sometimes are not aware of what is the right thing to do. So actions are very important. And so good virtue and good action, when they combine together, then the ethics becomes complete. So, as I said, that these theories are of different kind. One is talking about results, another is talking about action, another is talking about virtue of the individuals and all. So, from that, you are what is called principle. They said you have principle, and then look at the context and try to apply those principles, and privilege one principle over the other in order to respond to the context. So that is how principalism comes. For principle, you must be knowing about it. Do no harm. This is principle applies across board, not only for the doctor. It applies to everybody. If you are doing research, people on whom you do research should not come to harm, right? They should have some benefit of doing research. In social science, it is very important. You go collect data, you do nothing for them. Do we have some obligation to do something good for them? Right? From that comes a very practical aspect of what we call risk-benefit analysis of the research. So when you do research proposal, you have to say that well, how much risk it will pose to the participant and how much benefit it will provide. If it is a benefit is more, you can do the research. And biomedicine and public health, it becomes very, very important. Third is respect for the person, from where two major things comes at a practical level. One is called informed consent. Second is the confidentiality. You must respect the person. You can't do anything on the person, even going and interacting and collecting data without taking the permission or the consent of the person. And in order to do that, you must provide information to that. And information that comes to you in a professional capacity must be kept confidential. So privacy and confidentiality is part of it. Justice, don't do research only on those people who are easily available. Do research according to the scientific methodology. That's how we keep doing research on poor people, but never do research on people who create poverty, because they are not easy to find, not easy to do research on. I think that's where, I mean, you have to see that, when you do research, you take care of getting all viewpoints together. And equity is very important, that findings of the research should not be used only for the betterment of people who are powerful, but for the people who are less powerful. These are the eight major things that makes your research ethical. This is the application of those four principles to the research setting. It says that it should be scientific validity, fair selection of participants, favorable risk-benefit ratio, independent review. We just go through each one very quickly. Social value. Should your research be really useful socially? Should your research ever be done in such a manner that it undermines the health system? Right? Should you do research which is for discovery of something which is going to harm large number of people? So these are the issues that are very, very important in working out the social value. Scientific validity. Unscientific research, but as a thumb rule, is considered to be unethical research. If you do unscientific research, no journal will publish it. The research you are doing, you are wasting resources, you are exposing people to harm, and at the end, it doesn't produce any value simply because nobody will accept it as a scientific research. Another is, as I told you, is a fair selection of participants. It should follow your scientific methodology, and you must minimize risk. And if you have vulnerable participants, like people who are suffering from COVID and all, then you must ensure that they are taken care of. Favorable risk-benefit ratio that we discussed, saying that, well, the benefit and risk must be balanced, and the benefit should be more than the risk. This is informed consent. There are different components of the informed consent. We normally say that it should be understood consent in the sense that just giving information is not sufficient. You must test the comprehension. So it should be voluntary. There should be a full disclosure about your research. There should be comprehension of that, and it should be documented. So written informed consent is a very important thing. In certain situation, you may not want to take informed consent, and there you are required to take the permission of the ethics committee to have waiver of the informed consent. But as a rule, there should be some documentation. Even where you are not taking, you have to note it down that oral consent was taken or verbal consent was taken, and there should be a witness which says that, yes, the process was carried out. So it's very, very important. You may not take the person who is giving information, that person's signature, but it has to be documented in certain manner. Respect for the participant. This is mainly for the prospective research, that risk-benefit ratio should remain the same, right? And enroll participants, if they are enrolled for say 6 months, 3 months for the experimental research, then you must ensure that they are taken care of for the entire period. Suppose you are doing research, say on cancer, but and that research is going to last for 6 months, and 6 months they are your participants, and they develop say malaria. Are you going to treat the malaria or not? Saying that no, it is not my responsibility. I am doing cancer research. Well, you have a responsibility there. If you do research and somebody comes to harm, do you have a responsibility to take care of that? Provide the free medical care for the injuries, and provide compensation if it is because of the clinical research that you are carrying out. Right. The last seven is a collaborative partnership, international partnership among the institutions, between institution to institution within India. There is a lot of exploitative relationship, and I think this is a good thing that has been brought out. That this should not be based on exploitation. It should be based on mutual respect, minimize disparities, do a lot of capacity building if the capacities are not there. And the last one is independent review. Ethics review is very, very important. That every health research, according to Indian law now, which was passed in March 2019, that every health research has to go through the review by the Research Ethics Committee. And most of the biomedical and public health journals will demand an approval letter from the ethics committee before they publish your research findings. This is very, very important. And this ethics committees are supposed to use the guidelines that I had mentioned earlier, so that you also know the guidelines, they also know the guidelines, and both of them try to ensure that those standards mentioned in the guidelines are followed. Anyway, we have now about 25-30 minutes. I have a film now to show. So, Dr. Lina, hello. Can you start?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah. Monish, can you play that? Can you start the video?
Yeah, ma'am. Just a second, ma'am.
Huh.
सर कॉल करता हूँ आपको 2 सेकंड. हाँ.
लग रहा है. हाँ यार, सारी रात थिएटर में. पता है किसी को सुना? बस देख ले. वो तुझे पता है अपना बाबर? कौन? वो? हाँ वही. वो एसोसिएट प्रोफेसर बन गया. एसोसिएट कैसे बन गया? हमने कहाँ ज्वाइन किया? Yeah, looks like he's got a lot of publications. लिखने पढ़ने का तो शुरू से शौक था. अच्छी बात है. लेकिन अगर हमें कुछ बनना है तो हमें कुछ ना कुछ लिखना पड़ेगा. वरना रह जाएंगे सारी उम्र एसोसिएट के. छोड़ यार. हमारी मैडम ने आज तक कौन सा कुछ लिखा होगा? ना उन्हें कुछ समझ है. वो भी तो प्रोफेसर बन गए हैं. ये बन जाएंगे. पता नहीं यार. थैंक यू. पहुंचे जो 2-4 घंटे मिले वो मेरे बच्चों के साथ. अब भाई मैं तो नहीं कर सकता. यार टाइम तो निकालना पड़ेगा. तेरे पास कुछ है तो कर. है मेरे पास. मैं तो लिख रहा हूँ इसमें आर्टिकल। कंडीशन तो मेरे पास सारी बड़ी है, कुछ इस पे काम करें तो उसका भी पेपर बन सकता है। यार एक डेडलाइन सेट कर, वो ऐसे ही लिख कर निकाल देगा और उसको दोबारा से देख, कुछ ना कुछ हो जाएगा यार। उसमें काफी काम है, महीना लगेगा उसका मतलब। महीना नहीं, पूरा दिन हो जाएगा। मैं हूँ ना तेरी हेल्प करने के लिए, तो शुरू कर यार, मिलके करेंगे, हो जाएगा। चल ठीक है। क्या हो रहा है? बस उसी आर्टिकल पे लगा हुआ है यार, ये तुमने फंसा दिया। ये एक महीने का काम नहीं था, बहुत अभी तक उसी आर्टिकल पे लगा हुआ है। और क्या भाई, मैंने तो आर्टिकल कंप्लीट भी कर लिया, मैडम को दिखाने जा रहा हूँ यार। काम ही कितना था, 15 महीनों का काम तो हुआ था, 10 और ऐड किए और आर्टिकल तैयार आ गया यार। कैसा यार, छोड़, नॉट माय अंग्रेजी ऑफ अंग्रेज यार। गूगल में 2 आर्टिकल सर्च कर, रिसीव हो निकाल, वो आगे पीछे लिख, आर्टिकल तैयार, परफेक्ट इंग्लिश। तो आगे आपने जानिए तो यार क्या ठीक। अच्छा ये बता, तेरे 15 से 25 मरीज जो 2 हफ्ते में हुए, ये 10 से 14 तुम्हारा क्या ख्याल है? तुमको तो मैं बता दूंगा। मैं काम कर, काम खत्म कर, 2 आर्टिकल कंप्लीट करने, 2 आर्टिकल, 2 आर्टिकल काम कर, और भी लिखना है। एक फिर आर्टिकल है, एक फिर आर्टिकल है, पूरा यूजर आर्टिकल बहुत बनेगा ना। सर भी फिक्स है, कितना होगा भाई वर्क में काम यार। कंप्लीट है मेरा, मेरी भी कंप्लीट है, तो देखना रह गया अभी यार। सब लोग ऐसे ही करते हैं। मेरा क्या ख्याल है, जो सारे एसोसिएट प्रोफेसर बने हैं, ये प्रोफेसर रिसर्च करके बने, क्या इज द एंड दैट मैटर्स यार। ये तरीका सही है, क्या सही है। आर्टिकल तो अच्छा है, लेकिन दिल नहीं मान रहा। छोड़ यार, दिल को छोड़, एसोसिएट प्रोफेसर बनेगा ना, दिल सब कुछ मानने लग जाएगा। मैं जा रहा हूँ अपना आर्टिकल मैडम को दिखाने, ठीक है? आप कर काम, मुझे मरवा ना देना। और नहीं मरते यार। दिन लगा के हमने काटी।
Oh,
So I think we're having a problem in
no. Okay.
playing it. If you could just tell us a little bit about what is there and what this basically covers, then it'll be good.
Well, can you hear me? Okay, right. He comes to his friend's place and tells her what happened when he went to see the head of department of surgery. I think he's from the surgery, and he shows it to the madam, and madam says to madam that we have written this article, both of them us jointly, and I want your opinion. So madam says that now you are coming after writing this article, and asking for my opinion. What did you do? What were you doing before writing? You should have come to me there. And he just couldn't answer this. He was very. Then his friend asked him, why did she ask like that? He said, what? She wanted co-authorship. All head of department want co-authorship of this, the juniors writing. And he said that how can I give co-authorship? And well, that ends there at that scene. And the next scene is of editor's office, where the friend of his is one of the editors of the journal, and she is given the paper and saying that this is the paper. Please go through it and let us know your opinion. And she opens the paper and she finds that it is the same paper that his friend has written along with the others, and he knows the inside details of it, that it was plagiarized, and the co-author is not has not done the research. And then it shows the dilemma of the woman who is a part of the journal. So this is a that's where the film ends, and so this is the film done at Center for Biomedical Ethics and Culture in Karachi, and we show it quite a lot to the students and in the training to the faculty, in order to elicit response to understand how universal are these practices, right? Doing a lot of plagiarism from the internet, and at the same time, authorship related issues and that kind of stuff. That is it as prevalent in India as it is depicted in Pakistan, and are we all same, in certain regions? So this is to understand about the issues related to the research integrity and scientific integrity. Let me start my PowerPoint. Is the PowerPoint coming? Are you able to see them? Yeah. So we go to this aspect. I think Dr. Leena said in the beginning that research involves power relationship. Actually, all relationship involves power. Medical ethics we talk about in terms of the relationship between doctors and patients. In research ethics, we talk about the relationship between the study participants and the researchers and the institution. And you'll find that the doctors are more powerful than patients, researchers are more powerful than the people from whom they collect information. And so there is a power relationship. And in science, it is the integrity. In all this ethics guidelines, there is a thumb rule that it is made to protect somebody. And that protection is for those people who are weak in the relationship. So the power relationship is to be balanced by having ethics that creates obligation on the parts of the people who are powerful in the relationship. So in medical ethics, there is a lot of obligation on doctors. In research ethics, there is a lot of obligations on the researchers, because the subjects of the participants are very weak. And in the scientific practice, in science, there are a lot of obligations on the practitioners of the science, because you can abuse the science if there are no, there are no code or regulation over the scientists. Plagiarism is one that scientists do, and there are many other, medical misconduct or research misconduct. It's like falsification, fabrication of data, inappropriate authorship. We'll take some of them and then go forward. All plagiarism. Plagiarism comes from Latin word. It means kidnapping. Literally, it means theft, stealing, from other people, right? So that is what we do, taking material of the one person to the another without giving any kind of credit to the person whose material you have taken. Passing other people's work as your own, using other people's ideas without appropriate credit or compensation, isn't the work of students and subordinates in supervisors' papers. without giving any credit to them. Usually, in a PhD thesis and all that do, the students should be the first author when the papers are presented on that. Using inputs of supervisor without proper acknowledgement. Students sometimes don't acknowledge the supervisor or guide. I think that is also improper. And not properly citing the sources. What are the typology of plagiarism? Plagiarism of ideas and plagiarism of text. Text is easy to find because there are a lot of plagiarism checker. But there's also a lot of self-plagiarism. We keep repeating our own, our own writing. The self-citation, recycling of our own texts. These are all self-plagiarism, and they are very, very prevalent in India also. Translational plagiarism. You are translating somebody's writing in a language that not many people in the country or the world know. And while translating, you insert your own ideas, and do that. Bureaucratic plagiarism, ghostwriting. Many of you are sitting here, maybe teachers, and the vice chancellor wants to give a lecture on something or wants to make a statement on something, and he'll be asked to write the statement. Ghostwriting is very much prevalent. But in medicine, the worst part of the ghostwriting is that large number of pharmaceutical companies, they get papers ghostwritten by the writing companies. There are scientific writers companies which do the writing for you. You have to pay them. And then they find an academic scientist who will become an author of the paper. So this ghostwriting and ghostwritten papers are major debate in the biomedicine and public health. And there are transcultural and disciplinary differences and plagiarism. This is the age of photoshopping. Photoshopping is well known. You know all the fake news that comes where things are changed. And there are plagiarism checkers now available. And then there are also software available which can beat the plagiarism checker. So there's all kind of game is going on. But ultimately, what is very, very important is that write your own stuff, do it yourself rather than making copies from your other papers as well as other people's papers. What do we look at it? I'm the editor of the journal. That's what we normally do. Is it the entire paper plagiarized or a small portion? If a small portion, what kind of portion it is, right? What is the originality of the copied material? Copying standards, phrases versus original writings of the another author. Have you copied the original writing of another author, or there are standard phrases, right? Sometimes description of methodology may be similar because it is similarly described in most of the paper, as compared to the discussion and finding, which are the original writings of the another author. Where it is appearing? Is it appearing in the introduction? It is appearing in the discussion on the findings or something like that. Referencing. Are you referring to somebody's ideas in a correct way or wrong way? It's very, very important there. Intention. Did you have really an intention to deceive people? Now, it's very difficult to prove. As you can see in this film, did they have intention? It looked where they were doing it intentionally. Or they made a mistake and unconsciously. No, they did not. But how do I prove as an editor? It's very, very difficult because normally people who are involved, they will refuse to accept that, yeah, they did it intentionally. Author seniority is very important. If somebody who is a professor and whose text is found to be plagiarized, we are very strict as compared to somebody who is totally novice, a student. We want to actually educate the student. So we have to take that into consideration and then discuss, interact with the author. They based on that. If it's a professor, if there is and professor says that, well, I did not know, we don't accept it. But student, perhaps, then we try to re-educate the students and ask that person to rewrite. But it should be one time and not repeated. Language, textual overlap, that is what UGC looks at, 20% cutoff and all. That is important, but is not sufficient because 20% of the plagiarism of original writing will not be acceptable to a journal. We normally go for a zero tolerance to plagiarism. Only thing is that when there are common phrases and that kind of things are copied, we may be slightly, considerate and ask them to make a change. We are editors are supposed to complain about the plagiarism by the staff or the students of the institution to the head of the institution. Oftentimes it is not done. Only when there are very severe cases where senior people have done plagiarism in a very bad way, we end up doing it. Otherwise, we just rejection of the paper is a norm. The other is the data fabrication and falsification. This became very important. I think all of you must have read about a paper written by authors from Harvard as well as a private company called Surgisphere on hydroxychloroquine in the journal called Lancet. Lancet is one of the topmost medical journal of the world, and they had also done other authors had also done similar paper in New England Journal of Medicine. There is another topmost journal, one from UK, one from USA, and both the papers were retracted simply because the data which they were using for the large number of hospitals from 80, 90 countries all over the world, they were not able to show that from where the data came about. They were not able to allow the independent reviewers to have a look at those data. So the papers were withdrawn. They are called retraction, and that is whatever they did. It seemed that since they are not allowing, perhaps they fabricated data or they falsified the data. Fabrication of data is very common. In this film, this fellow says that I had 15 patients of this condition. The condition he was dealing with, shoulder arthroplasty, is with a very, very rare condition. And in 2 weeks, he gets 10 new cases, which is impossible in that hospital. That's how that another fellow asked him, that from where did you get this 10? He said, I'm not going to tell you. They were fabricated data. You sit in the canteen of the institution and fill up the form, the data form. And that's how it was done. There's a falsification is similar kind of stuff where you try to, change the data in the way in order to, get the right kind of trends of the findings that you want. There are many other inappropriate behavior which are also considered to be misconduct, and they are, it's like making false accusation about misconduct against somebody. Failure to report the misconduct of the people you know about is also considered to be a misconduct. Withholding and destroying the evidence about the misconduct. If somebody acts as a whistleblower against the person who is doing misconduct and retaliating against that person, this is also a misconduct. How do you find out this misconduct in research? Editorial scrutiny, peer review, whistleblowing is a very, very important. Asking people to, sending an independent reviewer to look at the data, redoing experiment, all those things are done, but many of them require a lot of resources to do it. Whistleblowing is the most common, where somebody who knows about it makes it known, and that leads to a problem. Whistleblower and how to do the inquiry of the whistleblowing, the providing security to the whistleblower. Many times whistleblowers get penalized and they suffer. And you'll find that in medicine, those who have done whistleblowing, almost 90% of them have suffered. They lost their job, they have financially suffered. Many of them had a mental health problem. There are people who have committed suicide because of the harassment by the powerful people because they became whistleblowers. So it's a very, very, very difficult area where you require legal support and protection for the people to speak out and say that there are others who are doing unethical work. Coming to the last few slides, this is about publication ethics and what we called a new discipline called journalology. So you have a right as well as responsibilities to publish your results. Not reporting negative findings of the result, that happens quite a lot in clinical trial, is considered to be a misconduct. Gradually, still not included as in the list of misconduct, but there is a big pressure saying that it should be, because if you use a drug for certain condition and find that drug is not working in that condition, then everybody should know about it so that in future nobody does that research for that condition, again. Otherwise, you are going to waste a lot of resources and put a lot of people under risk by doing that experiment again. You have to disclose the sources of funding. You have to be culturally sensitive. You cannot publish people's photograph without getting their permission. Or if you publish photograph, you have to mask the faces, and you have to, again, confidentiality is very, very important. Authorship is a very important issue, as we were talking about here in this one, where they were sharing the authorship without actually working together. So here you'll find that it should be based on the contribution. We also oftentimes ask each author to tell us what contribution they made in doing this research and in writing the paper. It should not be based on the status. Sometimes the first author is one of the powerful person in the institution, or the person who raised the fund. A student has to be first author of the student research. There's a lot of gifting of the authorship that is going on. I think that is also considered to be very unethical. Gross authors, as I said, that where the things are written by somebody else while the authorship is taken by somebody else. These are the authorship criteria. These are the four criteria which are used together, where you should have made a substantial contribution in conception, design, acquisition of data or analysis, and the interpretation of data, drafting the work or revising it critically for the important intellectual content, final approval of the version that is to be published, and lastly, you can't say that you will be able to defend only one section of the paper and not all the section of the paper. There has to be agreement that the entire paper is, you are also part of it, and you will be able to defend it. If you can't, then you should not. If you are just say a statistician and you have just looked at help them in creating few tables, and the rest of the things you do not cannot stand by, then you should not be one of the authors. You can be acknowledged, for providing their services, but you cannot be one of the authors. So authors must meet all the four conditions. That is what is required. Now, journal, as I was talking to you, these are the journal models. When you send your paper, there are journals where readers have to pay. That means if you want to get an article from a journal, either you have to subscribe to it. If it is on the internet, if you are not a subscriber, you have to make payment. You go to the open access journal, then author has to pay. The author makes payment, and the journal article is available free of charge to everybody. Then there are hybrid journal. Half of the articles will be readers pay articles where you can download only on the payment or having subscription. Half of the papers where authors might have paid for the paper, and you may be able to download them free of charge. And the last one is our philanthropic one. Indian Journal of Medical Ethics for last 28 years is being brought out on the philanthropic model. So we don't charge from the author for publishing the paper, but we do full peer review, and we also don't charge anything for the download of it. We charge a subscription only for a print issue of the journal. On online, it is freely available. Scientific journals are the gatekeepers. What they publish influence the professional practices as well as policies. But then there are also predatory journals. I'm sure many of you know. If you don't know, you must ask your professor about it, because they keep contacting students and the faculty. They don't have a good peer review system, and they take money from you to publish your paper, but they have no value simply because they have no scientific standing, because they are violating most of the ethical norms of peer review and publishing good science. You should also look at the political economy. That is where a lot of oligopoly of a publisher has taken place. 2013 data show that four major companies, Elsevier, Springer, Wiley, and Taylor and Francis, they accounted for half of all papers published in the world, and they control 50 to 70% of the journals published in social sciences, natural sciences, and medical sciences. The only thing that is left out by them is humanities. That includes philosophy and ethics. So we are quite blessed at the moment. Only 20% of the journals are controlled by them. If you add a couple of more big publishers, like Sage and others, you will find that almost 80% of all journals are controlled by few companies in the world. And this oligopoly is a really major problem because they determine what price you will get the access to the science. So academic publishing has also become a business, and profit margin is very high as many pharmaceutical companies. And it says that Elsevier in 2010 made more profit than the Apple made. So it's, in 2015 made more profit than the Apple. So you can see that academic publishing and the science access to science is such a big thing. Revenue is it come to them from the subscription reprints of the clinical trial papers and that are sold to the pharma companies and all. High cost of subscription and problem in the excess has also led to what is called counter movement of pirates. You might have heard about them. I'm sure many of you might have gone to the Science Hub, which was founded by Alexandra Elbakian, and once you get the paper through that, you will be able to see her waving her hand to you. And she has made millions of papers available free of charge, but it's all pirated. And then if you are deontologist, you will say that, well, that is unprincipled. That is not the right ethics. It's the unmoral thing to do. But still, many people end up doing it simply because we have not tried to control the academic business of publishing. I think that is what needs to be done. Same thing applies to books. Library Genesis is LibGen is another website where books are pirated and people are downloading from from the developing countries. That is simply because it is not accessible. And you can discuss at length if you have time about ethics of piracy. Can you be Robin Hood? You can rob the rich for the poor people. Is it ethical? I think these issues are very difficult to resolve easily, and we all belong to the developing world, and many of us don't have resources to get the scientific publishing as we require for our own professional work, and we end up using the pirates. So should we be blamed for it, and should we be unethical about it? I think these are the issues which are very difficult. I may not be able to take you straight away. This is right ethics or wrong ethics. I think that requires much more deliberation. That yes, it would be unethical if you are able to bring the publishing business under control and ensure that the prices of scientific publishing is reduced. It's like saying that, well, today in COVID crisis, can private sector profiteering? And they are doing many of them. The data are coming out that they are charging huge amount of money. Shouldn't that price be brought to a reasonable level so that people don't have to violate laws? I think that is the same thing as in ethics of privacy. So this is a issue of journalology, which also applies to the ethics in research. And I hope you will have some ideas for discussion after that. I end here and I wait for your question. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jisani, for that very dense presentation with theoretical insights, replete with case studies. And I think your presentation really calls for serious reflection and introspection on our part as academicians, as researchers. It was quite revealing, in fact, to know about the kind of monopoly that exists in the field of publications. So actually, I shall now invite my colleague, Dr. colleague Kavita Peter, to moderate the question answer session, but she was having some difficulty in joining us because of connectivity issues. So I'm not too sure if she's here. Is Kavita Peter there, or? Well, I don't think she's there. Okay, sir.
Tina, I'm here.
Oh, well, wonderful. Kavita, may I now invite you to please take this forward?
Thank you, Lena, and welcome to the Q&A for this session. And we had a very, very expansive survey by Dr. Jasani. I mean, his expertise comes through very well. And he kind of flagged a lot of questions and tensions central to public health. And especially the survey of historical events and how it generates questions to the broad range of social conditions that spill over medical services and health perspectives. And most interestingly, he also highlighted the urgency, the need for urgency and speed of research during a pandemic without losing its intensity as well as integrity of the work. And also the whole range of aspects of plagiarism. I request participants to post their questions on the chat. And I think there was one early question related to publishing on Scopus journals. I request Dr. Jasani to speak a little bit about that.
You want Scopus? Scopus is one of the databases where journals are indexed. So when you talk about medical public health journals, they are normally indexed in the PubMed. PubMed is a board central indexing agency which allows most of the journals from the field of health to be indexed there. The biomedical journals also get indexed in something called Medline. Medline is a more rigorous in the sense that they look at they have certain criteria and they go through your journal before they put you in their index. Scopus is a private indexing agency which is also having a wider reach where large number of journals are indexed. We are also indexed on Scopus. We are indexed on PubMed. We are indexed on Medline, and we are also indexed on another indexing agency called Philosophers Index, which is mainly for the humanities journal. So we have also indexing there. So Scopus is an indexing agency. So if your journal is indexed there, then it is considered to be a journal that people whose content will be available to larger number of people. But it still does not ensure that your journal is standard quality. The quality is very different from the indexing. Indexing only says that, well, there will be certain basic things available, but not beyond that. Yeah.
So there's a related question about journals, and this is from Dr. Anita Panot, who asks about your opinion about what are the kind of journals that get into an UGC approval, and what would be your opinion about
journals getting approval of what?
The UGC, of the UGC.
Well, UGC started, identifying journals which are considered to be good journals for publishing papers by the staff and by the faculty as well as students. They begin with a big, long list of the journals, and then some people pointed out. We also wrote 2 editorials on it, saying that there are some predatory journals are included there, and there are some good journals which are left out. There is also debate between whether only print journals should be included or print as well as online journals. And now online publishing, that is what open access publishing is mainly online publishing. They don't have a print copy. So should they also be there or not? Ultimately, after a lot of debate and all, I think now it is very, very balanced. And you have a list of the journals where it should be published. If you go out of that list, there is also likelihood of selecting a journal which may be predatory journal. And India is one of the center where the large number of predatory journals are published from. And so one has to be very, very careful. I think that UGC provides you some kind of guidance about selecting the right kind of journal. Secondly, if any other new journal is started, it may have to apply to the UGC and meet the UGC standards in order to get included in the list of the UGC, which is also a good thing that at least there is a journal standard is being looked after by some agency in India.
Thank you, sir. There is another question from Shalini Sinha, who asked whether there are certain standards. I mean, you spoke about ethical standards related to scientific research, but what about humanities and social science? Whether you would like to indicate aspects on that, guidelines for that.
Well, I think this is a bit difficult and controversial area in the sense I got involved in 1998 in designing some ethical guidelines for social science research, and in the process where Dr. Ghanshyam Shah was also one of the person there. There were public health people, there were social scientists. Dr. Professor Lakshmi Lingam was also a member of it from TISA. So they had set up a committee in Sehat in order to design guidelines. And then we were told that, well, don't try to overrush. You people are expert in health, and you can't take on entire social sciences. So we organized a national conference in YMCA Bombay, and where we were told that please, confine yourself to the health. And so we came out with the Sehat guidelines for social science research in health in year 2000. But we could not have a guidelines for the for the larger social science research. In 2017, when Indian Council of Medical Research redesigned the guideline, they created a section on social science research in health. So if you go through that 2017 guideline, if you are doing any research in sociology, in health, on health in say economics, political science, or anthropology, or whichever, you should be following it, and your institution should have an ethics committee, which is registered with the Department of Health Research in the Ministry of Health. This is now requirement as a legal requirement, because in March 2019, Government of India passed that rule. So everybody is now covered. So I can tell you that yes, social sciences are covered in health research, but social sciences are not covered in so-called non-health research. Now, how do you define non-health research? I don't know. It is a problematic, because suppose you are doing research on, say, water supply, on water. I know, isn't it part of the health as a determinant of health? So there is going to be some overlapping area, gray areas, where things will keep coming. If social science community, particularly Indian Council of Social Science Research, if it puts together things and its own guideline, I think it would be the best thing to happen. So far, only ICMR has been very active in designing this guideline. Indian Council of Social Science Research has done more work in research integrity to a certain extent, plagiarism and that kind of stuff, but they have not done enough work on working out detailed guidelines for social science research. I think that is a requirement, and no guideline should be imposed from above. Guidelines should evolve from the debate within the profession. And you will find that public health researchers, medical researchers, and other health researchers, they all contribute in the debate in order to design the guidelines for their own discipline. Same way, there should be a debate on this subject. And there should be a committee from those professions to put together all those things and come out with a very balanced guideline. A guideline should facilitate research, but at the same time ensures that research is done ethically. That means your research question is designed ethically, and it is conducted ethically. That means people on whom you conduct research are not harmed and are provided some benefit. And should also look at that findings of your research are made available to the larger community of social scientists. But that question remains. And many of you are social scientists. So I hope you will carry this message and do something in order to design guidelines for the other social science researchers.
So my next question is somewhere connected with your idea that the participants of research have to be very conscious about the impact of their research on the subjects that they are, so Priyam Ghosh has this question for you about the role of eugenics in perpetuating racism in the space of nation state and citizenship. And Priyam contextualizes this in terms of migration to Western nations, sexual orientation, and citizenship questions, and how this is all whether the outcome of studies in eugenics, etc., have an impact on how people perceive themselves in another country itself.
You can look at, say, population control program. You can look at it in terms of eugenics and say that is it having any tendency, the way it is being implemented, which may be to eliminate people who are less fortunate or are vulnerable as compared to people who are more powerful. So you can look at eugenics at that level. On the other hand, I was talking all the time that most of the controversies in research, like say Tuskegee trial or the trial in Narangwal or many other trials that we talked about, they all those research were carried out on the people who were vulnerable. I mean, the tea room trade study of Lord Humphrey on homosexual was one sexual minority, that they were being deceived. So you will find that the researchers study people who are very vulnerable. If we go and study migrant people, right? So you have to be very, very careful about how you are studying them. Secondly, what you are coming out with at the end, saying that well, people should not be cared for, or are you going to have going to come out with the recommendations which are which are to strengthen them, to empower them? I think this is very, very important. And if you are not going to, if you are not going to be concerned about and sensitive about empowering those people, and if you go and try to study them, why should they give you information? I know this happened in 1960s in USA. It's a very classical example that when civil rights movement with Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and all of them, led, and it is being repeated now. But at that time in 60s, many black people refused to cooperate with the researcher and say that we will not give you data, because after giving data, what are you going to do about it? You are going to come out with policies saying that, well, we are getting a lot of welfare money, and because we are getting welfare money, there are freeloaders. They were called freeloaders, right? And so ultimately, the result of the research will be that you will give a recommendation to the government to stop giving them welfare. So at the end, they will be harmed. You see, so it has its understanding is at the level of eugenics, that the people who are less fortunate, who are vulnerable, they don't have the right to have a part of the resources of the society. I think this is this comes from the eugenics, but it is also a broader concept of doing research on vulnerable to increase the vulnerability, which is not part of the social value that I had talked as one of the principles of doing good research. Okay.
So let me just sneak in a small question that I have about the role of narrative medicine, because that is, if the purpose of our webinar is to look at intersections where, here we have the medical practitioner trying to also undertake a kind of auto-ethnographic kind of journey into, so we have Varghese Abraham's look at, the AIDS.
I read him,
and Dr. Atul Gavande's work as well in this area. But I'm not sure we are seeing a lot of those kind of journeys in India, at least, because both these, perhaps you could enlighten us if there have been interventions on this kind of work.
Oh, there is a lot of things happening in India. Perhaps we have Indian Journal of Medical Ethics. When I took over as editor, before me also there were some papers which were narrative writing, what we call experiential writing or creative writing, which has a broad base, where a patient can narrate his or her experience with the medical system or healthcare or a disease, or a condition that he or she suffered from. And a doctor can also, narrate his or her experiences of doing clinical practice or doing public health or interaction with the larger society and all kind of stuff. We were publishing it, but very very infrequently. When I took over as an editor in 2012, we made it a policy, and I wrote an editorial saying that we are interested in on writings on humanities and health. And so you will find that those narratives we are publishing quite a lot under the section called creative writing. We also are publishing under creative writing short stories, poems, and the other kind of narration. There's a separate journal which is being published from Delhi. Is mainly on the health and humanities. I'm forgetting his name. The doctor. They are the regular contributor in IGME, and they have done massive work. I think that for last 5 years that online journal is being published. So it's an open access journal which looks at the narrative part. In ethics, narrative ethics has become a very very important area or a sub branch of bioethics. There is a journal of narrative ethics. You might look at on the internet and you'll find it, where it is considered to be very important. We went for narratives because we realized that a cold-blooded discussion about what is justice or what is autonomy and all, which is highly philosophical, sometimes very abstract, is not sufficient to make people sensitive. People become more sensitive when they are explained same say idea of autonomy or justice in through somebody's experience. So we publish a lot of case studies which are narrations or which are narration of a something happening by another person, right? And then there is a debate on discussion on it. We invite people to react on it, and that is sensitizing more people on ethics. And large number of the cases that we publish are on research ethics. So there is a case study section also in IGME. You can have a look at it, and many other journals in bioethics, they have a similar section. So narrative and qualitative research is considered to be one of the most important part of bioethics research. When you do research on research using a qualitative research, then you come out with how researchers conducted research. Okay, and that may also provide you a lot of information. How doctors conduct their clinical practice, that again brings out huge amount of information that sensitizes doctor to change, saying that, well, was I doing like this? And then they understand that what kind of changes they should be making. Ultimately, ethics is nothing but a powerful person, a person who is in a position of power, is able to put his or her feet into the shoes of the opposite person with whom he or she is interacting, and that person is weak. You have to see, the doctor becomes ethical when he or she starts seeing the interaction from the eyes of the patient, that how the patient looks at me, how the patient feels about it. So ethics is nothing but a person who is on this side trying to understand the problems of the people on the other side in a sensitive manner. I think that's the way narratives are very important. So I do agree with you that narratives are there and they should be encouraged. And I hope more journals will start publishing narratives. At the moment, you have two, but I hope in coming time, medical humanities and healthcare and humanities will evolve as an interesting subject. And you all are social scientists, and we bank upon you to write, and we are ready to publish. Come over. Yeah, no, that is what is my opinion.
Glad you make a very strong case for storytelling amidst all the grim and very clinical kind of setting, but it is definitely an impetus for more work in that area. So there is a question from Kevna Desai, who asks whether there should be separate institutes or centers for academics and research, where she's indicating that whether research in social science should be only linked to activism and policy making, and whether forcing academicians to do research affects the quality, as a mandatory criteria, affects the quality of research.
Yeah. Well, when you are not inclined to do research and you are forced to do it just because of your because of the requirement of your job, then people do a bad job of it. That is true. But at the same time, the problem in academic is that it is assumed, and I don't know how far is the big good evidence on it. It is assumed that those academic who do research in the subject they teach, they actually do good teaching, better teaching, and more enlightened teaching. Because unless you do research, you do not end up doing a study of the broader area. And you may again, we all have a tendency to get into our own ivory tower. Research may force you to get out of your ivory tower, go in the field, meet people, interact with them, get information. So there is I would say, theoretical case for teacher to do research. But whether all teacher must be forcefully made to do research is a good idea or not, I don't know. I Perhaps you can use other methods of inducing them to do it. Give them incentives, give them some other support, rather than creating fiat, a bureaucratic fiat that you must show. That is what was there in publish or perish. These were the two junior doctors who were assistant professors in the medical school, and they sit together and say, well, we have to publish, otherwise, a person who was with us has now become associate professor, and we are just here. We are doing the same amount of work in terms of clinical care, doing the same number of surgeries, but we are not going up simply because we are not published a paper. So this is a dilemma, that how do you balance between your professional job and research. It's very, very important. Now, should there be a center separately? Well, it depends upon the institution. I have found that institutions which are more conscious about training their staff, the faculty in research, encouraging them to do research, get projects for the research, they having a separate good setting in to facilitate that. Because teachers also need the support structure in order to good research. Everybody is not able to raise funds to do research. Institutions should have intramural funds available to the teachers to do those kind of stuff, and they should have a good ethics committee which does not look at only your proposals, but is also involved in the ethics education of teachers on research. So there are institutions which are doing it. There are many institutions have center for ethics. NAPOA, where we have even started NAPOA University in Mangalore. We have started the master's degree course in research ethics. So they take every year 10 students, and 2 years master's degree they have started, MSc. It's a medical school as well as dental school and nursing school. It's a private university, but it is committed to philanthropy. So they are able to do it with the support they have got from National Institute of Health in USA. So next 5 years, you'll find that 10 students are produced with a master's degree in research ethics. So I think every institution can really provide facilitation to research by the faculty. It is possible to do it.
So we have a question about data collection from Natty Lopez, who asks about ethical practices and data collection in a pandemic scenario, and whether telephonic conversations can add up to a reasonable resource for.
Well, data collection methods, if you read any research methodology book, will tell you that is not just person-to-person data collection. There are many, many other methods which are legitimately used by the social scientists from time to time. Telephonic interview is one of them. And telephonic interviews being used for last 60, 70 years now. And you will find so many papers. Just see, do the internet searches of papers which are based on telephonic interviews, large number of them. They started in developed countries first because they had a better telephone connection, but now also we have ourselves have it. And you will find that most of the ethics guidelines will tell you that when you are doing telephonic interviews and all, what are the standards to be used for the ethics. Internet interviews, they are also very common now, right? They may be either through the Zoom like or Skype like one-to-one interviews. I appeared into so many interviews where the researchers were studying other researchers, and where they wanted me to give half an hour to answer the question. So that was on Skype, and I have done it internationally. So sitting in US and in Europe, you can interview people in India and other places. It's possible. So and all of them are covered under different guidelines. So data collection has to be systematic, and the way you select people, that should be systematic depending upon the kind of scientific methodology you have. So there is no problem if you use telephone, you use internet for data collection. What you have to ensure is that you are getting right. I mean, when you do telephonic interview and only 10% answer when you make 100 calls, then that becomes a problem, because 90% no response rate will make your data bias. So if Indian people are not used to giving telephonic interviews, you may have a lot of no response coming. But people, unless you start it, people will not get used to being part of the surveys through telephone. So it's a legitimate method, but only you have to see that it meets the scientific standards and ethical standards. If it does, you can do using all these methods. These are I would say techniques of collection. Techniques should fulfill certain scientific and ethical requirements. Then those techniques are fine. Absolutely no problem.
So we have a question related to what you mentioned earlier about an appointment of an ethics committee. And this is Dr. Anita Panod, who asked whether we need an ethics committee for approval of student research. Now, this is probably with short-term projects which are undertaken by students either individually or as a group project. Or they may be, if there is a journal being published by a college and students are sending abstracts, etc. So do we need an ethics committee to review these proposals or abstracts?
Well, as a thumb rule, yes, in the sense that all research, at least at the moment, law is concerned, all health research must go through the ethics review. That is what is the requirement. However, what happens at the institutional level, I'm a member of the ethics committee of Tata Institute of Social Sciences. Okay, this is like it's a social science university, right? Now we look at all the research proposals that are sent from the faculty, which are on the health. We also look at PhD and MPhil research proposals. But master's degree, that is a student research, they don't come to us. They have set up a separate committee for it. So institution, because if that start coming to the main ethics committee, we will have such a workload that we will not be able to fulfill our task. We may have to meet almost every week. We are all volunteers, who are part of the ethics committee. 50% have to be from outside the institution, right? So managing that kind of ethics committee is extremely difficult. So what they do is they have multiple committees. That's how they have at the departmental level or between few departments, they have their own committees which act as an ethics committee and scientific committee jointly, and they vet those student proposals. So there is always a way of doing it. In biomedical institutions, normally the larger ethics committee have a subcommittee which looks at the student research, and then when the main committee meets, all the student research proposals that they have approved, they are reported there in half an hour time. Say, okay, we reviewed 20 proposals and these are the outcome of it. Ethics review, just like scientific review, helps you to improve the quality of research and quality of the data collection. So ethics is not something that is hindrance, but ethics is to improve the quality as well as sensitivity to the participant. So it helps. So if you create some mechanism, then it is good. That is what I would say. As far as government laws are concerned, they do not differentiate between student research and faculty research. Research is research done by anybody. If professor doing research has to come to the ethics committee to get a proposal reviewed, then why not the student? That is the question that you ask. That somebody who has so much of experience, so much of work, and past research that person has done, and still that person has to come there, then the students are new. They are more likely to make a mistake in the way they are conducting research. So I think in principle, yes, but in practice, you can work out different ways of and different committees in order to ensure that the students are also provided support, not only for the scientific part, but also for the research part or for the ethics part. And the last thing that you said was publishing in the university journal or the college journal. Now, what is this college journal? Is this college journal has any ambition to become a good journal or an academic journal, or it is just a newsletter? Now, you have to differentiate between these two, because many students research that we have published. We have a student corner in our journal where social science, medical students, all of them can publish whatever they have. But we use the same standard to judge their paper, right? And we encourage them more to write experiential stuff, narrative stuff about their experience of doing various kinds of stuff. But it is important that journal also works out certain standard and say that, well, did they do this research correctly? Because if you encourage non-scientific research or research which is not scientifically good enough to publish in the college journals, then the student will get used to publishing like this. Now, these people, in this film, that fellow was having only 15 patients in a dissertation that he did for the post-graduation in surgery. Okay, the 15 patients were not sufficient. That was not sufficient for statistical power to do any generalization based on that. Then why did the examination committee pass that thesis? That is the first question I'll ask. Okay, it was passed, and then the students becomes very relaxed, saying that, oh, this is also good research, but it is not. If you have a underpowered research, that means you did research on those 15 people. You are not going to communicate it to anybody because nobody will believe this research as a good research, because 15 patients. When you require 25 patients in order to have statistical power to do any kind of statistical analysis. So it is very good to have a right kind of scientific practice inculcated in research in the students from the beginning, rather than they're learning it when they come into society and they are in academic institutions, and then they suddenly realize that this kind of paper will not be published in a good scientific journal, right? So I think even those kind of journals should have certain standards set. It may not be great standard, but definitely basic scientific and basic ethical standards should be there for publication.
So very quickly, I'll club two questions together, but they are. Yeah. This is one is from Shivali and the other is from Yamini. So both of them are actually asking that due to certain peculiar conditions. So Shivali's question is, if one wants to conduct a survey or examine who are the beneficiaries of funding or aid in times of a pandemic. There have been donors who have donated grains or food or medicines, etc. But they are not fixed. They are a moving population in case of migrant workers, perhaps. I think that's what she's indicating. How does one, kind of understand those responses, because they may not have a phone or they may not be equipped with those technological devices which one will get source information. And the other one is also from Yamini, who says, especially if you're looking at shelter homes or corrective institutions or jails, perhaps, again, the subjects that you want to work with are not really accessible to the researcher. So how would you look at this kind of dilemma of the researcher?
Well, the first one about population, which is very mobile for their own socio-economic reasons, it is extremely difficult to do research on them. During the COVID crisis, you are not able to go in the field, but there I have seen people, who are as aid workers and others, who are able to go around. So getting special permission to go and meet them is a big challenge, and it's also a big risk for the researcher himself or herself. So if you are not able to actually go there and get it, or they don't have any means of technology to approach them, then how do you carry out research? You just cannot. What you can do is monitoring. That if you are a funder and you have given money to somebody for giving ration to them, then you try to get it through other means, saying that, well, when the ration is being distributed, can you do a video and send it to us so that we come to know that ration is reached to them? But if you want to go and interview people who have actually received it, you cannot, right? So maybe that information requires actually access to those people. So any research that has to be possible either through technology or physical access. Otherwise, it is not. Now, coming to the prison and the remand homes and those areas, those are the places where there is a lot of abuses occur. And I have some experience. My colleagues had done research in prisons and all. It's extremely difficult. In the sense that suppose I'm doing a research to find out the health condition of prisoners. And if I get all the permissions to go to the prison and interview the people to find out, their illnesses and that kind of stuff and what facilities are available and all, the warden or the superintendent of the prison, according to the rule, will not allow you to have privacy to talk to the person, isn't it? They say it has to be so. Visual privacy will not be given, but can you create auditory privacy, because you don't want prison authority to know what they have to say. Another thing is that many prison authorities, they say that after you do research, give us finding. Now, if I have interviewed say 50 people in one prison and find that 30 of them or 20 of them have given negative views about the prison situation, they may be able to find out who were these people, and they may get penalized, and they are already abused, and my research can create more abuse if indirect identification is possible. So the prison authorities of any institution are considered to be gatekeepers. In research, you have participants, you have researchers, you have institutions, and there is a fourth player. It's called gatekeeper. So I want to do research in your college. What do? I want to do research on, say, teachers in your college or students in your college. I have to go to the principal first. Principal will give me permission after looking at my research proposal and all. And if she says or he says that, well, after you finish, you give me the finding, about my college. Now, if you do study of only one college, it is possible that he or she will be able to find out who is saying what. I mean, at least few people will get indirectly identified. I had this problem. I remember when I was doing an anthropological study in 3 primary health centers in villages. Each place I was supposed to stay for 3 months and do anthropological work to understand, what health workers were doing. I came back, government of Maharashtra had given me a project. I started writing, and suddenly I realized that whatever I'm going to write will be identifiable with the center that I visited, because there are so much of contextual thing there. So then I had to go back to the health secretary. D.T. Joseph was health secretary. This is 1987-88. And I told him that, sir, I took only study for three primary health centers, but this is not going to be sufficient, because somebody will get penalized for when I quote these people. And I had to take another 25, primary health centers and get more funding from the government of Maharashtra. And instead of going there for 3 months, I and researchers went for a week and created additional anthropological data, which we combined with this anthropological data to mask the identity of these 3 centers that I studied. So confidentiality is a level of confidentiality that you require. Access is one, as you say, that how do I access prisoners? How do I access people in the institution like hospital, where I had to go to the director of the hospital to get access, or principal of the college I have to get permission, right? But if I don't have enough number of institutions, then the people who are talking to me may indirectly get identified, and their confidentiality is violated. And if a person in power turns out to be vindictive, those people can really have a hell of the life, because of my research, which is not permissible. So if you are conscious about research ethics in each one of them, you will design your research keeping all those things in mind. And if you forget it, then I will be blessed by ethics committee who is at least having that much of intelligence and understanding to ask me that question: that why are you doing only this three institutions? At that time, there was no ethics committee, 1987, 88. No ethics committee in my institution. At that time, if there was ethics committee, they would have asked me this question: that what happens if they get identified? Oh, they may get dismissed. They get harassed. They will transfer. You know, a medical officer telling something, wrong, bad about the government will be punished by in different manner. So I have to be very, very careful how I am doing. And these are the areas, prison, remand home, and institutions. They are very, very difficult areas of doing research, and you have to keep in mind what I told you: the gatekeepers and their role. The gatekeeper, you get permission, but gatekeeper should be provided information only to certain extent, so that the confidentiality of the information provided by the participants from the institution is not betrayed. I think that is very, very important. So it's a good question. In social science research, it is a very, very fundamental that you have to negotiate. Even you go to the village, and village, I remember we were doing a Sehat in late 1970s. My researchers were doing a research on abortion. There were villages where they were not allowed to do any interview with women, saying that abortion, no, it is a stigmatized thing. In our community, no woman undergoes abortion. So we will not allow you to do any interview there. So you might have selected that village, but you have to select another village simply because the panchayat or panchayat leaders or somebody like that, they refuse to give you entry. So they are all, you know, we call gatekeepers, and gatekeepers needs to be negotiated in a manner where there some of their correct demand are met, but they are at the same time told that they will not have information about the village or the institution from where the data is collected, and who have said what from the institution. So I think this is a very sensitive area, and we should keep that in mind while doing research.
Thank you, sir, for that. We've lost Kavita. Again, she has connectivity issues. So there's a time we are almost drawing close to 12:30. So just two questions, if you could quickly answer them. One question is my Nandini Sengupta, and she asks if in this race to get to a vaccine for COVID-19, will we compromise on principles of bioethics? And the other is by Kanchana, and she says, how does gender politics play out in ethics?
Both of them require a separate lecture. I'm going to speak to some of the journalists and others on vaccine and research. But vaccine research is a very big area, because vaccines are given to people who are healthy, while therapeutic drugs are given to the people who are unhealthy, who are having a disease to cure them. And that's how vaccines are more controversial. Now, in COVID, what is going to happen? I have no idea. There are hundreds or more candidate vaccines, being tried out. The point, what is going to be important is that do we have really technical capabilities to produce vaccine immediately? Because we don't know enough about the disease, and we don't know whether the antibodies which are required, when you do vaccination, it produces antibody in the body which fights against the possible infection in future, whether they will be produced in the enough quantity to fight against COVID, and whether they will last for long enough time. Because the booster dose is required depending upon how long the antibodies last in your body after you have taken the vaccine. So there are some many strong scientific challenges there. And well, this vaccines are being tried, and we have so far I haven't received any report saying that there is some success there. Most of them are struggling at the moment. Perhaps it may take 6 months or a year or a year and a half to produce a vaccine. If you look at the history, to get a new vaccine for a disease has taken a very long time, few years. There are no examples where you say that, well, in 2 months people have produced new vaccine. No, it is very technically, scientifically very challenging task, and we have to wait for it. There are also suggestions that people can use a methodology or design called CHIM. I don't know how many of you have heard of. It's called Controlled Human Infection Trials. Where people are where vaccines are tested by infecting people deliberately. Now that is also not possible in this epidemic because we don't have cure for it. But people have done this kind of research in malaria, typhoid, and those kind of diseases where there is a cure available. People are very, when you give vaccine and then infect the people to find out whether the vaccine is working or not. But that is also not possible here. So there are WHO documents. You will find that what are the criteria to be used in order to have a CHIM kind of methodology for vaccine production. So that is a vaccine area. The gender issue, massive. The lockdown has created a massive gender issue, and one of the biggest one is, all of you know, domestic violence. We publish a paper in Indian Journal of Medical Ethics looking at domestic violence as a one of the epidemic caused by the lockdown. Where women and women in the household suffered quite a lot, and this has happened not only in India but also in the developed countries and everywhere. So it's a gender aspect is very important, that whatever thing that we design is has to be looked at keeping in mind gender as well as other vulnerabilities. Caste is another area. I mean, you and I who are middle class, who are sitting and talking on Zoom, while large number of poor people who live in totally unhygienic condition where they are not able to maintain physical distancing. They have in the house there no space for the people to continuously stay for 24 hours. They have to come out and sit outside. These are the people who are suffer from some of the measures that we are taking. So gender issue is at every level. Now, I don't know whether biologically women are more prone to COVID or not. We still don't have that kind of data. What we have found is that in Western countries, large number of men have died than the women. But I don't know. But what is also coming out is that death is more for the people who are more vulnerable and having more comorbidity. So those who could not get good healthcare services, they're normally poor people, people who are oppressed like Black, Dalits, and Muslims, who are stigmatized. They are the ones who have suffered more. So stigmatization is another area of a COVID crisis, and in any crisis, where certain communities are stigmatized and certain kind of myths are created about they being the ones who are responsible for the crisis. So I think this has also happened in India. And so along with the gender issue, we also have to keep the issue of caste and religion in mind, and how we are treating people who are at the lower level, who are minorities and who are lower caste, and of course women. They all are part of this analysis. There should be more research carried out, and I hope some of you will design some research project and have more research on looking at the gender, caste, and religious aspect of this epidemic. At the moment, the data are very sketchy. No, we don't have very good data immediately available, but there is no doubt that there is suffering of these people. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. Indeed, a very enlightening session and some very significant takeaways. You have given us some new areas of doing research. We shall definitely take them up. One, of course, is sociology of health. May I now request Kulvinder Bhatt to propose the vote of thanks?
Yeah. Good afternoon. It gives me immense pleasure in proposing vote of thanks this afternoon. At the outset, I would like to express sincere gratitude to Dr. Amar Jesani for deepful insights into research ethics and ethical framework. Also, the detailed information on scientific integrity, misconduct, and publication ethics. I would also like to thank the Provost, Dr. Niranjan Hiranandani. Special thanks to our principal ma'am, Dr. Hemlata Bagla, for motivating us in all our endeavors. Also, thanks to our vice principals for supporting us in all our events. A big thank you to Dr. Leena Pujari, convener research committee, and all my colleagues in the research committee for all their efforts during the times of COVID. The smooth flow of the webinar would not have been possible without the technical support of Roshan and Monish. A special mention of our student volunteers, Yulan, Niharika, Shreya, Kremika, and Isha for designing posters, feedback forms, and initiating the links across the groups. Last but never the least, thanks to all of you for being a participative and patient audience. We would like to have you all for all our future endeavors for more insightful experiences. Take care and stay safe.
Thank you,
Okay, thank you.
Kulvinder. Thank you so much. And to the participants, some of you raised your hands. I'm so sorry. Because of time constraints, we are unable to sort of unmute you. May I now, is Monish around? Can you administer the feedback form, Monish? Oh, it's already in the chat box. Okay. All right. So we request the participants to fill up the feedback form. Thank you so much.
Anybody who's a question I could not answer can write to me by email, and I'll be.
That's lovely. That's really nice.
Definitely respond to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.